I'd like you to think of a brand, the first brand that comes to mind. Whichever brand you just thought of, the chances are they wouldn't be around without investing in some form of advertising over the years. In fact, over the last 100 years, advertising has been one of the key drivers of growth for most of the brands and businesses that we've known and loved, shaping our daily lives. The clothes we wear, the beer we drink, the cars we drive. Without great advertising, great businesses simply wouldn't exist. But advertising is an industry that's currently in crisis. We've seen it go through many eras, back when newspapers and the press dominated and rational persuasion was the name of the game, through the TV era, where we learned the power of the big idea and connecting with audiences on a more emotional level. And we're currently at that difficult period of transition where the industry is trying to figure out what the next era of advertising will look like. With the rise of digital, the traditional channels no longer carry the same weight they once did. The holding companies are facing existential questions of relevance, and trust in advertisers is at an all-time low. All hallmark signs of an industry in transition. And the big question that everyone's asking is this: where next? Well, I believe that the next era of advertising will be defined by social media. Over the last 10 years, for better or for worse, social media has changed the world. It's now the dominant form of attention, and the only thing that's for sure is that it's not going away. And where the attention goes, the brands will follow. But for most brands, the shift to social hasn't been a positive one. In fact, I'd argue that for the majority of brands, it's making them worse rather than better at marketing. Countless brands are spending a serious amount of time, money, and energy chasing objectives that don't really build their brands in an effort to do social, and not nearly enough on the things that do. And as a result, even 10 years on, social is still yet to prove beyond doubt its capability as a lead channel, right at the heart of the marketing mix for brands. For a space that has so much power and prominence over our day-to-day lives, and so much potential to build brilliant brands, the relative impact it's had so far for businesses just doesn't match. It's the great paradox of social. Something's going seriously wrong here. So I'm here today to talk to you about how we can do better. There's no doubt in my mind that the brands that will win over the next decade and beyond will be those who put social right at the heart of their marketing, not on the periphery. So we need to learn, and quickly, how to build brilliant brands on social, and do that in a way that makes this shift a positive one that is responsible, respects people's rights to privacy, and adds value rather than extracts it. So why do we find ourselves in this position today? Well, I think somewhere along the way, we forgot how great brands are actually built. Marketing has become an industry that trades on the currency of new. And that's at the root of the problem, because we value what's new over what works. And it's holding us back from building great brands. I think we see this in a lot of industries. A disruption occurs, the technology moves on, the environment changes, and the industry collectively panics. We all go into desperation mode, running around like headless chickens, desperately trying to reinvent ourselves for a changing world. But I'd argue that in that process of reinvention, we often lose sight of the fundamentals, our models about how things really work. We take one step forward, but 2 steps back. And nowhere is that more true than when it comes to marketing. So let's take a step back and look at how great brands are actually built. I'd like you to go back to that brand you thought of at the start of this talk. You might have thought of a brand like Apple, Nike, Guinness. Whichever brand you thought of, I'm going to talk you through 3 things that they've almost certainly done to make them come to mind. 3 timeless truths that they've followed. Now, the first thing that's interesting about those brands is this. There's a shared understanding between you and I about what that brand means. I know what it stands for, but more importantly, I know that you also know what it stands for. There's a collective understanding. And that's why buying an iPhone isn't a purely rational decision. You're buying into Apple, the brand, what it stands for, and therefore what it signals to others. And Apple did that by going broad to a mass audience with one big, consistent idea, carving their space in culture. Timeless truth number 1, great brands go broad. Next up, I bet that brand you thought of has probably made you feel something. And that's because it's been proven time and time again that the best brands get there by developing an emotional connection with their audiences. They make them feel something. Rational messages that only seek to persuade using things like price, product features, availability are great tools to sell products in the short term, but they don't build brands over the long term because they don't make you feel anything. Timeless truth number 2, great brands make you feel. And finally, I bet that brand you thought of has probably been very consistent over the years. Back in 1971, 50 years ago today, Stephen King wrote about the first prerequisite for a brand. He says, first, it has to be a coherent totality, not a lot of bits. The product, the packaging, and all the elements of the communication must blend seamlessly into one single brand personality. And that remains truer than ever today. When you thought of that brand, what were the things that came to mind? Maybe a logo, a colour, a character, a tagline. That didn't happen by accident. These are distinctive brand assets, and all the strongest brands build them and reinforce them consistently over time. Great brands go broad, great brands make you feel, and great brands are consistent. 3 timeless truths of how brands are actually built. Now let's take those and look at some of the commonly accepted best practices when it comes to social. Now, first of all, social is an industry that's practically built on things like follow accounts, engagements, and shares. The theory goes that you build a community and then you reach them for free organically. It sounds great, except that's not really the way it works, and it hasn't worked that way in a long time. The truth is, the main social platforms don't have any organic reach anymore. And in reality, the average person won't follow many brands on social, yet alone engage with their posts. The only people who do are those who are already very loyal to the brand. And what this means is that we have this strange paradox where brands are making almost all of their decisions when it comes to social to cater towards a very small group of heavy buyers, the people who would already probably buy anyway, and aren't the people that the brand needs to reach in order to grow, the light buyers. And next up, social points us towards those much more rational forms of messaging. A lot of the hype around digital and social in general falls under the personalisation bucket. You chop up your target audience into millions of tiny segments and serve them all individual and personalised messages that explain exactly why they should buy your product. If you've ever been followed around the internet with a pair of trainers because you clicked on them once, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's personalisation, and it doesn't build brands because it doesn't make you feel anything. Yet we've resorted almost entirely to these rational messages of persuasion. And finally, you can see where I'm going with this. Social disincentivises consistency. We're told that we need to be always on, posting multiple times a day on every single platform under the sun. It's very tough to be consistent when that's the ask. Timeless truths tell us to go broad, evoke emotion, and be consistent. Yet social best practice tells us to go narrow with rational messages that lack consistency. There's an issue here. And the more you look at the commonly accepted best practices when it comes to social, the more examples you see of this. They're literally everywhere. My point is this. Because social has a reputation as a new, exciting, innovative medium for brands, we've all forgotten the fundamentals about how brands are actually built. We need to go back to first principles and use these as a basis to build up new practices fit for new environments. There's a quote from Jeff Bezos that I love, the founder of Amazon. He says, "I very frequently get the question, what's going to change in the next 10 years? It's a very good question. But I almost never get the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that's actually the more important question of the two. Amazon, a technology company at the very cutting edge of what's possible, shaping our new environments. But they do that with a focus on the enduring, the things that don't change, the timeless truths. We could learn a lot from that. The old and the new don't need to be opposing concepts. It's a false dichotomy. You don't have to pick one or the other. They could and should work beautifully together. Because the truth is, it's in the intersection of the old and the new that will provide the blueprint for the next generation of brilliant brands. This isn't me saying marketing hasn't changed. Far from it. We're now living in a drastically different era to the broadcast era. It's a decentralized, distributed, and fragmented world. And I believe we're currently at the very start of an exciting new time for social, with environments like TikTok and the rise of the creator economy threatening the dominance of the Facebook family of apps for the first time in a long time. There will certainly be rich opportunities for businesses to build brilliant brands if we can get this right. So when we can reconcile the fact that whilst the behaviours, the tools, and the environments have moved on and will continue to move on, yet the foundational building blocks of how brands are built remain as true as ever, we start to strike gold. So let's put this into practice. Let's go back to that timeless truth about breadth. Great brands go broad. Tomorrow's brands will recognise that marketing is about the numbers. You need to be reaching as many people as possible. So they'll see social as their place to go broad, with consistent investment into paid media to get them beyond their core audience. They won't just see social as a place to talk to their core community, they'll see it as a place to go broad, achieving their scale in layers across clusters of complementary channels and shaping their place in culture. They'll see the innate opportunity within social to create experiences that are more emotional. They'll make less, but they'll make it more meaningful. They'll aim to make people laugh, make people cry, but they'll know that they won't get there purely with rational messages. They'll know how to earn attention, but importantly, use that attention in a positive way, with experiences that people actually want to participate with. And finally, of course, they'll be consistent. Yes, there are now more touch points than ever before, and with the rise of the audience voice and influencers, it's now harder than ever to ensure consistency across all. But tomorrow's brands will lean in, they'll recognise that a top-down model won't cut it anymore, and they'll lean into the burgeoning creator economy, working alongside creators to interpret their distinctive assets in interesting new ways, creating order from the chaos. The next era of advertising will be built on the basis of the things that have always worked, the fundamentals. But crucially, will give them new interpretations that turn today's challenges into opportunities, seizing the potential of our new environments. Social is the place where these philosophies can collide and where we have an opportunity to build better brands, more open, more democratic, and more accountable. They'll be called social-first brands because they'll finally realise the potential of social as the central environment in which their brands will be built. This isn't just some crazy theory. There are brands who are already doing this to huge success. brands like Gymshark, Glossier, Netflix. So here's my ask to you. Whether you work in marketing, you're a founder of a business, a student thinking about a career in marketing, remember that new is great, new is exciting, and new is often where we need to be, but only when we put it through the lens of the foundations, the things that really work. It's about bringing the old and the new together to generate brilliant new routes forward. The next great brands will be built on social, so let's use that as an opportunity to build them better. Thank you very much.